This is K.M. Weiland, and you're listening to the 93rd episode of the Wordplay Podcast. Did I say I finished with my historical work in progress, The Deepest Breaths first draft? Afraid I lied about that one. I settled myself down this week for the first round of edits with my so-called first draft, only to discover, at the end of the first read-through, that the story isn't quite as finished as I had thought. I realized, after much histrionic sobbing, screaming, and fainting, that in order for the story to reach its full potential, it needs to lose about 20,000 words of fat and gain 40,000 words of muscle. I find it just slightly ironic, or maybe that's just the hysterics speaking, that my last book ended up being so long that I had to cut 40,000 words, and this one ends up being 40,000 words too short. So, for the first time in my writing life, I'm going back to the drawing board to figure out how to add words to a formally completed manuscript. Wish me luck, since I'm sure I'm in for another wild ride. Are digressive subplots sinking your story? The latest post in the video series on my blog shows how writers can learn from the movie like Dandelion Dust in keeping extraneous subplots from bogging down our stories. You can watch the video on my blog at wordplay-kmweiland, that's weiland.blogspot.com. New videos are posted every Wednesday. Meanwhile, enjoy this week's podcast, The Most Common Mistakes Series Part 5, How Not to Use Speaker Tags and Action Beats. Don't jeopardize your character's witty dialogue with punctuation and stylistic mistakes. Let's take a look at two means for indicating speakers and varying the rhythm of speech and narrative, the speaker tag and the action beat. The speaker tag, which in its most basic form consists of the speaker's name and a speech-related verb, said, shouted, asked, etc., is often the simplest way of indicating which character is speaking. Example: I told you not to throw that cat at me, Mike said. How not to use it. Don't overuse it. It's unnecessary to say he said or she said at the end of every line of dialogue. If you have only two speakers, you only need to indicate the speaker every few lines. If you have more than two speakers, vary your speaker tags with action beats. Don't vary the verb too often. Said is your most utilitarian speech verb. Its near invisibility allows your dialogue to stand on its own 2 feet without telling the reader how to read the dialogue. Use other verbs, shouted, sniffled, whined, and modifiers, briskly, quietly, nervously, with caution. Don't underuse it. Whenever it's possible readers might not understand which speaker is talking, such as after a lengthy paragraph of narrative, indicate the speaker at the first opportunity. Don't punctuate the preceding dialogue with a period. Unless the dialogue ends with an exclamation point or a question mark, finish it off with a comma inside the quote marks, followed by the speaker tag, as per the previous example. The action beat is a description of the actions, gestures, facial expressions, or even thoughts that accompany the speaker's words. It is included in the same paragraph as the dialogue as an indication that the person performing the action is also the person speaking. Example: I didn't throw the cat at you. Lee grabbed a vase of flowers, but I am going to throw this. How not to use it. Don't combine it with a speaker tag. Used together, they're almost always repetitious. When in doubt, cut the speaker tag in favor of the action beat, since the action beat offers you more opportunities for characterization. Don't use it solely for the sake of speaker identification. If the only reason you've inserted an action beat is to identify the speaker, you're probably better off with a speaker tag. Action beats must serve to move the story forward or to advance characterization. They cannot exist only to give the character busy work. Don't allow it to interrupt your dialogue. A lengthy action beat in every line of dialogue will chop up the rhythm of the character's speech and destroy the flow of the conversation. Don't punctuate the previous dialogue with a comma. Unless the action beat interrupts a dialogue sentence, always end the dialogue preceding the action beat as you would if it stood alone. If you can expunge these common mistakes from your dialogue, you'll not only strengthen your character's conversations, you'll also mark yourself as a professional. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, visit me on the web at wordplay-kmwyland, that's weiland.blogspot.com, and be sure to listen again next week.